see it. Maybe I'll ask you first. What do you remember about being approached by the filmmakers and your experience?
Okay. Well, at first I said no. And I had become friends with a young pregnant woman, or woman. And she was looking for some advice, and she said no too. Because I thought they were college students, which is perfectly fine. But we were in a different world, you know. And then Nelson, or maybe it was, I can't remember who it was, kind of cleared it up, that it was Albert Maysles, and they were really trying to do this project. So we said yes. And so it went from there, and you know, I remember her right well, and I remember I met Mr. Maysles on the train. That really caught me off guard, and that was a whole experience in itself, to sit across from Albert Maysles. So that was great.
And when you guys didn't, I mean, Albert's talked a lot in his lifetime about his desire to make a train film, and he shot a lot of footage. And it was for years a project that he would talk about quite often. Do you guys remember when it felt like this was actually going to happen and how it got started?
Yeah, well, Albert had been talking about this film for years and years and years, and had been shooting on trains, you know, on and off when he was traveling. And I think he just talked about the film for so long that it sort of felt like it was always in development and always sort of happening. But this particular film only really got jump-started in the summer, fall of 2013. And that's when a number of pieces just kind of started falling into place to allow us to really dedicate time and effort to a specific film project. So this was shot, over the winter of 2013 into 2014. And even though for a moment we kind of considered using some of Albert's earlier footage from trains, you know, pretty quickly in the edit it became clear that it wasn't really going to work, and we really kind of wanted and needed the Empire Builder itself to kind of help structure this film. So while this was an idea that Albert had for many years, yes, all of this took place within a year's time, pretty much.
And how did you settle on the Empire Builder? Because the film does seem to be very much of a moment in dealing with sort of economic realities of America, and what could be more perfect than sort of in North Dakota and dealing with what was then a real boom in these towns. How did that sort of come together? Why the Empire Builder?
Well, we had looked into a few different Amtrak lines. So David and Ben, you guys checked out California Zephyr, you did an early research trip, and then we looked at the City of New Orleans line, and then Nelson, one of our shooter directors, and Martha Wollner, our amazing story producer, who I thought was going to come tonight, but I guess she's not here yet. Nelson and Martha did a test run on the Empire Builder, and I think specifically for that reason, because it was the height of the oil boom, and there were so many interesting people and passengers and stories kind of hovering around that space. They came back from that trip and were really clear that this was probably the train we wanted to focus on. So we made that the one line that we ended up filming on.
The other thing that strikes me so unique about the film is that it doesn't follow geographically. You know, there's this incredible moment. She's getting off the train in Seattle, Seaport of Seattle, and like the next cut is Minneapolis, St. Paul. I know you edited the film. How did that sort of structure take form? It's quite unusual to move back and forth along the route.
Well, it really came because we wanted to focus on the stories of the different passengers and the ones we felt were strongest, and those didn't really play into a linear pattern or structure. So as much as we wanted to keep it, we didn't want to be too disorienting, but again, pretty early on it was clear that we were going to have to jump back and forth between eastbound and westbound stories. And so, you know, from that point it just became kind of a puzzle of piecing together kind of fragments of conversations and stories that sort of added up, you know, we felt enough to hopefully keep you interested. But as some of the text in the early part of the film was meant to clarify, you know, that there are eastbound and westbound trains on the tracks at any given moment. So there's always multiple Empire builders in motion. So the stories we chose kind of reflected sort of the, you know, the nature of what you know, the array of stories that could be happening at any given moment.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about, there are 5 new credited filmmakers on the film. In addition to the work that Albert did as a cameraman on the film, I do think that the film's really sort of under his influence, sort of like under the sign of Maysles. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with Albert and sort of what it was like collaborating?
Well, this really is Albert's film, and we were collaborating with him. And like Lynn mentioned, he's been talking about this film for a long, long time. And it was our job, I think, just to help spur that vision. And I think we knew early on that we had a finite amount of time on the train. It was a fixed amount of time, and it worked to our advantage to have so many people, and we could spread ourselves out across the train. And when we came across someone we felt like came across through the camera, we were able to, between the 4 or 5 of us, shift from one person to the next, and we just had coverage along the length of the train, which ran almost half a mile long, the length of the train. So we were able to sort of divide and conquer.
I think the question everyone wants to know is, have you been in contact? She got your information, and what is? Have you been in contact with your friend who you met on the train?
Okay, yeah, so I'll just explain
She
that.
has given birth by now.
I was not feeling well the whole trip. I probably should not have gone out there. And so I was sitting in the back of the train when she got on. And this is how I met her, and this is why we're depicted as being close. It's because she wasn't on the train that long before she ran into an issue. She had come to the back of the train where I was in the back of the train taking photos. She sat on the other side. We didn't even say hi at that point. And the woman on the train wanted her to get back to her seat. But she had come back there to stretch out. But I had been sitting there for a while taking photos, and she had never said that to me. For some reason, she was making her go back. So I intervened, and I said, no, not to the woman, but I said to her, you just stay where you are. I got you on this. And I said, you relax. And I got you covered on that. So she loved that. And she was very filled with energy and life, and she had her funny moments and so forth. But she sort of then came toward me because of that act of helping her. I was in my own world too. Like I said, I never felt that well. And so no, I didn't keep in touch with her. And I think one of the reasons why is because I think I had a more realistic outlook on keeping in touch with people in those situations. I'm old enough to know that with all of the best intentions in the world, life doesn't really play out that you keep in touch, nor, a lot of times you cherish the moments that you have with people, and you know that there's a beginning and an end, and you can make a lot of promises and things that I even did. But she went back to her world, and I went into my world. So that was it. It was nice and beautiful for exactly what it was.
Are you happy with the work that you made on the trip?
Yeah, well.
And I'm curious, how much was, there's a poignant moment in the film where you said this might be the last time I'm seeing these places. I mean,
I'm really itching to talk about Albert Maysles right now, but.
okay, go on.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question. But what would you like to say about Albert?
Thank you. I mean, I'm doing fine. I had more heart attacks. I'm going to Nepal. For the same reasons that I took that train, I'm using those same reasons to do more stuff. About Mr. Maysles. For me, I was out there doing exactly what he had done through a span of a lifetime, which was take random photos and to appreciate life for what it was. And when I met him, I could see it in his eyes that he loved life. And he was active and clear and on it up until the very end. He passed away not that long after the film was made. And I had the great honor to see him again here in the city. And so to sit across from him that day when the crew brought me in to see him, and I had my camera and he had his camera, we were sitting across, and for me, being on the medications with this and all, I was overwhelmed. I actually started to cry a little. I just couldn't believe it, that it was Mr. Maysles. So much so that I even forgot to get the photo. It was supposed to be the best photo I've ever taken in my life. I didn't take it. But how that works out with this crew, I need to say this too, is that they all are pure Albert Maysles filmmakers, as far as I'm concerned. They gave us the freedom to say no. There was never any pressure. There was never any manipulation to get people to participate. It was, and then they seemed to be aware, like Mr. Maysles did throughout his life, the train, it was like a rolling confessional. And, but there, you know, Albert Maysles' work was not forced. And I think that one of the reasons that people were in the film were speaking so freely was because the people that were behind the film gave the freedom to be quiet. Nelson sat across from me on that train for half an hour at one point because I was in an empty car, and we never said one word. So, and that's something that Albert Maysles would do through a lifetime, which would to let people be people in their own element and then see what happens. So I think that the Maysles crew, I call them, deserve a good round of applause for helping Mr. Maysles to put this film out. You know.
Some questions, please, guys.
What do you think it is that's missing between the truth that is portrayed on the camera and on the screen versus like the way that we perceive the world and the way because there seems to be that sort of liberation, and I've experienced it firsthand. I took a train from Mississippi to New York, and that's how I'm here now. So it's like there's something that's very raw and honest, and I'm curious as to what creates the balance of separation. Would you repeat the question, please? Yes.
I'll repeat the question. It's a question about what it is, I think, unique to train travel.
Yeah.
That sort of allows a certain type of reveal to take place with people's emotions, or and what you guys think about that. How maybe what it meant to you. I mean, maybe you're the person to start with because there's a reason at that moment in your life where you felt like you needed to get on a train.
And how does it work with?
I guess
Sorry, it's a complicated question. You know, just me thinking.
In a way, I think Joel did a good job of articulating it earlier, and that's the part of the magic of Albert. There's like this quality that's so disarming that I think you can see throughout the film that people are just comfortable. And like Joel mentioned, there was the luxury that we had is that there were so many people on the train that there wasn't any pressure on our end to capture everything. So if someone had any hesitation, we didn't have to push. And if there was someone that we came across like Joel, Albert did his magic.
And also, like Joel said, it's sort of interesting how you sort of know you'll never see that person again, so it might enable you to be a bit more free with your thoughts and interactions than you would in your normal life. You know, this moving confessional, I think, is actually a really apt way to describe it. I mean, that's what I found a lot in a lot of the material is that, you know, you could tell that people were opening up in ways that, you know, came from, you know, David just asking, so where are you going, you know, or what's on your mind, you know, people were so often ready to unload in a way that reminds, I think it serves as a reminder that there are all these stories kind of pent up sometimes, and it can take just a simple gesture of asking, you know. And somehow I think the rhythmic quality of the train, you know, you have this forward motion, but you're not in the driver's seat, so it just creates this really interesting space to be both introspective and outgoing at the same time.
Yes.
So, I guess I shouldn't be surprised how attached I feel to all these characters on the train, and really very curious about, you know, the outcomes, if you've ever, I don't know if I should ask that, but how everything turned out for some of these people. Did that young man find love, and was the baby born, and, you know, was that woman with the 4 children, did her family take her back into the fold, like, all of these things, you know. It was very touching.
It was a question about being moved by the film and drawn into the characters and wanting to know how much you know about the outcomes of some of those stories.
We tried to get in touch with pretty much all of the passengers who figured fairly prominently, and I'd say a good majority of them we couldn't track down again, even though we had their contact information. They signed release forms. More often than not, the phone number they left didn't work. Email address was never, we never got a reply back. So a lot of those stories we don't know. I mean, we weren't able to be in touch with Cheryl, who was the pregnant woman, you know, because everyone asks about her, but we never got in touch with her. You know, there are a handful of passengers we were able to reconnect with. So when we screened the film in Chicago, it was really exciting to have the elder gentleman, the observation car, who knew Martin Luther King. He came to the screening. Obviously Joel we've been in touch with a lot. We sent a DVD of the film to Roxy, who's the young woman in the knit cap, who likes VW bands, and you know, a handful of others. But I mean, again, like the train, it's like you have these interactions, and there is, I guess, for me at least, a bit of magic, kind of not knowing what happens after that moment in time.
I agree with that, at least for me. There is something about not knowing. And I think that with Cheryl, that I knew the whole time that I was never going to see her again. And I knew the probability was great that I was never going to talk to her again. Even though I wanted to, like anybody would. But at the front of my thinking was that reality. And there's a certain thing about that I don't mind not knowing. And you know, again, it goes back to I think maybe I'm going too deep into the Albert Maysles formula, and maybe I don't know enough about Maysles films. But I think that also is an element of portraying life for exactly what it is on the spot. Having these Mr. Maysles and his brother, and then this Maysles crew, who are very good at letting life happen. And that's the way life is. It's not knowing. And so, like everyone on the train said that. I don't know how this is going to end up. So there's some sort of poetic justice for us to not know how it ended up. You know, it kind of leaves it hanging in a way, and that's not such a bad thing in my mind.
Yes.
I'm sure there are difficult things to part with in any editing process, but this project is unique in that I would imagine you had to part with entire narratives, entire stories. Curious to hear how that was for you, what the painful moments were, what the hard things to say goodbye to were, and like how you made some of those decisions.
You know, honestly, there wasn't a lot that footage like you described. I mean, the film is only 76 minutes, and somehow all of the pieces that ended up in the final cut were part of that first round of selections that we made. So, honestly, I can't say that there is a lot. I mean, there were definitely a ton of interactions and people that we met that were amazing, that had amazing stories, were amazing people, that we would have ideally liked to include in the film, but their footage wasn't great. I mean, I think there's a difference between stories that work in the film and people who are interesting, but whose material on camera just didn't feel right, So, I mean, there's a ton of that, and we shot over 400 hours, so, looking through all of that, a lot of that just was unusable, and it wasn't because the stories weren't interesting, but it's hard to describe, but sometimes the material just, has a different quality when someone is more relaxed telling their story, and, some of the stories that we thought were great, but just didn't work, were the ones where the passengers were a little bit more performative, a little bit more reality TV ready. In this day and age, it's kind of hard to avoid that. So I would say for the most part, the stories that you see here were the ones that we started working with pretty early on, and shaping them down, carving them down, and trying to arrange them in a way that made sense.
And everything seems so incredibly natural, and I think the reason Albert and you guys are able to get that feeling is because it's also what you're putting out there, trying to over choreograph. I think what you guys say about Albert's great gift is this is someone whose whole filmmaking career is about adjusting to the moment and maybe doing one thing and realizing that he has to quickly go into another direction. It seems completely natural that he would be obsessed with trains, because everyone in this film is in a moment of transition. Is there another question? Yes.
I just had a quick follow-up to that, which is that there's a lot of really clear themes of the passengers that are in the film. So did you screen at all for that type of story, either while you were on the train or when you started editing, or is that just everybody, more or less, that's on that train?
Oh yeah, there was no direction. I mean, in that sense, like, we weren't steering people any particular way. And like Lynn was saying, in vetting the material that we came back with, I think that was part of it too, was just finding those themes that are resonant. And that's one of the facets that allowed it to sort of rise to the occasion in a way. But the process really was, I wish Martha was here, but she was, when we talk about her, we sort of describe her as our secret weapon. She was passing through each of the cars, introducing to the passengers the idea of the film before anyone saw camera, so it was, it sort of softened or cushioned our presence in a way. So she and Albert would speak to someone like Joel and just mention that we were on the train making a film. But aside from that, no, we weren't steering people.
Well, we all definitely have this idea of the American dream in mind. It was sort of the only thing that was sort of this umbrella for, what we were kind of looking for. But yeah, we were just trying to be open. But absolutely, I was really shocked myself in reviewing the material once we got it, how many people, I mean, this was so much of the material was people talking about family, parents talking about kids talking about parents in different ways and different configurations. So that theme emerged really quickly. Like some of the earliest scenes I cut were all these mother-child scenes, and not, again, we weren't pursuing that. It's just, it was incredible how many of the passengers kind of fit into that category in different interesting ways. Again, the single mom with the 4 kids, that David shot all of that. The redhead-haired woman who just came back from meeting her daughter, she gave up, for 47 years before. I mean, all these different interesting relationships around family and children and parents, I thought was really striking.
There's some amazing footage that Albert shot throughout the course of his career. This film sort of remained unfinished. I know you're saying you didn't include it, but it's funny because one of the more interesting sequences which exist online, you can find it. There's an interview that Albert gave with Index magazine that included some outs from that unfinished film. The sort of scene that he always talked about was a scene of a woman being reunited with
3 round trips from Chicago to the West and back. So each of those trips are 1 week apiece, so there were 3 1-week trips. And then a 4th trip you guys did in cars across the country to take shots of the exterior of the train going by.
We have time for 1 or 2 more. Is there anything in the balcony? Yes.
Well, you shot the film a few years ago, and yet it seems really timely now. All these strangers who seem to find commonality on this train, and I'm curious. I don't know if you're able to talk about it, but what took so long for it to come out? And is there a chance it's going to keep playing in other places?
Yeah, we premiered it here in New York at the Tribeca Film Festival in 2015, and then we did a festival run for over a year. Played it, I think 60 or 70 festivals, and then because one of our funders, Al Jazeera America, as a company sort of folded, that just threw things sort of out of whack, and there are all these questions around distribution. I mean, Al Jazeera had been planning on releasing it theatrically, and then those plans just kind of went away when Al Jazeera America went away. So it's just been sort of a complicated, we just haven't been able to resolve a lot of things around that. So we're just really glad to be able to be showing it here this week, and again, Uptown at Maysles Documentary Center, and then we are open to showing it at other cinema houses across the country. But we have no formal distribution plans right now.
Yeah, I think as someone who runs a theater, I could say that one of the things that was really important to Albert, I think people don't realize it now, was that when he was beginning to make films with his brother, films like Salesman and Grey Gardens, it was kind of really unusual for these films to be exhibited in cinemas, and Maysles Films was doing it themselves. So one of the real radical things that Maysles Films Inc. was doing since the 1970s is getting the notion of getting documentaries into the cinema. This was an important part of the equation, and there's a preponderance of films being made these days. Not all of them deserve to be seen. I think this film certainly does. It really speaks to Lynn's wherewithal and saying, we're going to make sure this